So we are so excited to have Lisa Lavelle on the podcast today. She is the founder of the Lavelle Practice, a boutique couples therapy based in New York City, where she works with high-achieving couples navigating the unique pressures that success places on intimate relationships. She has over 25 years of experience treating individuals, families, and couples, including her role as the former director of training of the Ackerman Institute for the Family, and many, many years of teaching and training. Her treatment approach incorporates her training in the Ackerman Relational Approach and the work of Esther Perel and Terry Real. Lisa's approach is direct, warm, and rooted in the belief that the strongest relationships aren't the ones without rupture. They're the ones that know how to repair. I love that. Thank you so much, Lisa, for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted. I love that we're all women here doing this together in Women's History Month, so that makes it extra special.
I agree. This is great. So we always like to start off getting to know our guests a little bit, just a little bit about you and how you came to become a couples therapist. So if you feel comfortable, just telling us a little bit about your background and how you chose this specialty.
Sure. You know, it's interesting. Growing up, I had never been to therapy. My family had never been in therapy. I didn't know anyone who had been to therapy, let alone a therapist. And when I went off to college, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer because I liked to debate. And my mom said, I think you'd be great at it. And I went there and I realized I did not want to be a lawyer. And I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. But I was always curious about people, how they think, and relationships. So I said, well, let me take a psych elective. And I loved it. I loved it so much, I became a psych major. And then after that, I went to graduate school in New York. And in my second year field placement, I was placed at the Ackerman Institute. And it really changed my life. I was excited and terrified at the same time to do therapy because it's the first time I think I was exposed to it, which means doing the work on yourself. But I really had a chance to see firsthand the transformative power of therapy and having more people in the room. I always say the more people in the room, the better. And I think, as I did the training and went into family and couples therapy, I kept thinking, gosh, I wish my family had this. And I can see firsthand how it can transform people's lives, how relationships that can be a source of pain can also be a place for healing. So that really made me want to dedicate my life to helping other families and couples.
That's so lovely.
Yeah.
And type C people can really struggle in relationships. We talk about that a lot in our project, especially on our podcast. Type C people are avoiding conflict and they're saying yes all the time, and they're not voicing their needs, and they're prioritizing everyone else other than themselves. So that can create so many issues in all relationships, spouses, children, friends, coworkers. So would love to just hear about any experiences you have with type C people in your practice, what they're struggling with, how you sort of see some of those challenges.
I tell you, even the term type C, I learned it from Core. And when she told me about it, I was like, how interesting. What is this? You're type A, type B. I'm like, well, what's this type C? And when she told me about it, I started to research it. And I was like, this is really important because there are so many people that fall into these type C traits in terms of people pleasing, avoiding conflict, things like that. And I like the way that it captured certain character traits that are dominant in people with type C behavior. So when she invited me to the podcast, I had to go back through and think in my practice, who's type C? And there are so many people that have, if not all of these traits, many of these traits. I think something that I see a lot in clients with type C behavior is that they suppress their own needs. And they say everything is fine, it's no big deal. They go along to get along. And they're very compliant in therapy. but they end up harboring a lot of unmet needs and a lot of resentment. So that's one thing that is very striking to me. Sometimes they can fly under the radar. They can be very hard to detect because a type A or a type B is pretty dominant, but a type C, they're nice people, right? So I think that's something. I also see that I think, and I don't know if this trait goes with it, but from what I understand, I think what I see when type C people have had enough and resentment, they can start to pull away a little bit. But they sometimes do it in this nice way, not this overt way. So I think that can be the consequence of a type C person. I think thinking that they're not rocking the boat, but in fact, they are rocking the boat in the relationship by not sharing what their needs are, because I think they're afraid of conflict. But the very thing that they fear, they end up creating. So I also see that a lot in my practice. And let me know in terms of how I'm understanding type C, if it's connecting to the way that you're presenting it.
100%. I mean, I
Yeah.
think you nailed it. And I am very curious on in the couples that you work with where one person is a type C, is there a common denominator with the person that they're with, the person they're coupled up with? Is there a certain dominant personality type on the other side that kind of brought these two people together? Do you ever see anything that's like a common theme there?
I don't know. I was thinking about the notion, like, what would it be like to have two type C people in a relationship? And I was thinking about the couples that I work with, and I haven't seen that. But if you think about a type C person, and you think about attachment styles, it goes nicely with someone who is more dominant.
Yep.
Like it fits really nicely with that because they can be, go along to get along, not rock the boat, keep the peace, whatever their partner wants. So, I mean, if you think about it in terms of personality types, I could see a type A being a good fit in terms of their dynamics. But I think relationally, I can also see a lot of challenges and problems in those type of relationships. The very thing that brings them together is also the very thing that will create a rupture or conflict in their relationship.
So I think I was totally in line with what you were saying, Lisa, and also just thinking about this too. So we often talk about this challenge if the couple is having problems, and there may be resentment that the type C person is having, and as you say, sort of distance. And this probably will not be happening at the beginning of the relationship, but as time goes on, and the type C has squashed and squashed and squashed their needs and not getting anything in return, resentment grows. But the person that they may be with may not realize, right? Because the type C is not communicating this. And also they may be a person who likes having their needs met, who is very clear on their needs and who puts them out there. And so I'm sort of wondering, right, as you said, sometimes parts work and parts really don't work.
Yeah.
And in the situation where you have a partner who is maybe sort of wants to fix the problems, who's not type C, but maybe really has appreciated all that they have been able to get from the relationship. How do you kind of help them feel supported, but also get them to be willing to take less? And then the type C has to feel comfortable being willing to ask and state more. And this wasn't a dynamic that existed before. And so neither one of them really feels comfortable in this.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think one of the first pieces of work is helping, I think, the type C person, I think, to find their voice. And I think a part of that, at least in the work that I do, goes back to where they learn to be a pleaser. Where did they learn to keep themselves small? What did they protect by playing this role, usually in their family of origin? What was the cost of playing that role? Who did they learn it from? the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? So I think the first place I go to is family of origin, how that was learned, because I think it helps people understand why they are the way they are, and it opens up capacity for change. I think in taking that first step also, I think their partner, it gives them a context. And I think in having that context of this is where my partner comes from, it can also give them a compassionate understanding. Because when this type C person changes, and by changes, finds their voice, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, learning to rock the boat, voicing their resentments, it's going to create conflict in a relationship, but it's good conflict. It's good conflict. So I think helping their partner understand that, because like I said, like couples who really thrive are couples who can have repairs. I think type C people struggle with rocking the boat, so they keep it in. And when they keep it in, it impacts other aspects of the relationship.
What if the partner is not that flexible?
Well, I guess I would be curious about what would they be, what's their fear? Because I think the person in the receiving end of type C, they may feel like they have a lot of power. They get their needs met, whatever they want, their parenting strategies dictated, their sexual needs are taken care of. So I could see how that's very threatening and scary for a person who's on the receiving end to want to give that up. So I guess I would be curious with that person around their own power dynamic and what would it mean to give up power in a relationship? And also what would it mean for that person to be vulnerable? And I think power and vulnerability around type C relationships and their partner become key themes and threads that couples have to negotiate, right? I think both people have to have a willingness to be vulnerable, because that's where change comes. And I think it's scary for both parties.
Oh, I love that.
This is great stuff.
Yeah.
Do you see success in any of these situations? Do you see people being able to change? And change is really hard. We talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
Some of these patterns in a relationship are so deeply ingrained, they're so deeply rooted. It can be really hard to change it. We had someone in a session of ours ask us, okay, now I understand that I'm type C and I understand that I need to be more assertive. And, should I communicate that to people around me that I'm going to start being a little bit more assertive? And the scariness that brought up in this person. So I'm just really curious about, success and change and how you've seen people come to better places.
I like the example that you just gave where the person said, should I start telling people about this? And, I kind of think yes, because there's something about saying it out loud to yourself and to the people around you that opens up curiosity. And it also creates accountability for yourself and for other people, right? So the change, you're sort of narrating who you are, this new identity, and what's about to happen. So I think that can be really helpful. I think the other thing that would help a type C person is helping them be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because it's a radical new way of being with self and of being in relationship. So you're asking someone who's been a people pleaser, you're asking them, well, what do you think? What do you need? What are your desires? That's a lot of vulnerability. It's much easier to take care of someone else than turning the mirror on yourself. So I think in that process, I think that would be a slow, thoughtful, deliberate process around what are small ways that you can come out and be more vulnerable, right? Taking small steps in that, talking about who would their support system be around this, other people around this, how would your life be different in terms of that, using future-oriented questions. But I definitely do see there is a bridge, if you will, that a type C person can cross in the context of a relationship with their partner to show up in a way that rocks the boat in a way that's healthy for them and healthy for their relationship. Because if you're with a type C person, there's all the stuff that you don't know about them. That's such good stuff, important about what are their likes, what are their desires, what's annoying to them. And to me, the notion of curiosity around that can be a great connector for a couple.
And we talk a lot about how sometimes that requires the type C person to do a lot of work because they've spent so much time outwardly directed, not really being in touch with what they need and what they like and what like they've sort of been, living for other people and not living for themselves. So that takes some work to get underneath all that and start to figure it out.
Yeah, I think there's like the internal work, the relational work, like around family of origin, but there's also the day-to-day practical work with their partner. So I think in a couples therapy context, it would be coaching the type C person with their partner witnessing, right? I think once again, the partner has a compassionate understanding. Oh, so that's why you always say yes, but you actually resent me about it, right? If you're their partner and you really care about this person, and this is your favorite person in the world, you are going to want to help them, right? You are going to want to help them open up and be vulnerable because that's going to be better for your relationship. So I think there are practical things that you can do, but there is a lot of, I think, family of origin work to do as well.
How would you do that in the therapy session would you do that with the couple, or would you do that individually?
The family of origin work? I find the way that I was trained, and I think it's very helpful, I do it in session with the couple because I think it creates a compassionate understanding. My partner isn't just being an asshole or a jerk or this. There's a larger context to where that comes from. So they can see the behavior. It's not intentional, but it's something that they inherited. So I think when people can let their guard down a little bit and the behavior has a different meaning, I think it shifts something in the couple. I think the exception to that, if you have a couple that is highly reactive, like a high conflict couple that would use a vulnerability as ammunition, then that would not be a good place to go, because the last thing you want is to share something really vulnerable about how you grew up, and that's used against you in an argument. So that would be the exception.
Although I'm guessing that type C is very rarely in a high conflict type of relationship. Be more like the opposite of low conflict.
Yeah. But I tell you, I've seen when people get upset and they're not thinking rationally, they can go for the jugular sometimes and say the meanest thing they can find.
And that's a good point. We had someone on our talking about that who is a solid type C, and I think the way she described it was she would bottle everything up, anything, and then the fire hose would come out. And it was
absolutely
just an explosion with her husband.
Yeah, what's the phrase? The body keeps score.
Right.
And I think it is biologically impossible for your nervous system to just repress. That's got to go someplace, right? And so I think sometimes it can finally come out as in an explosion. It can be chronic fatigue. It can be all sorts of things that type of resentment or serving others and not taking care of yourself does take a toll on a person's mental health and on their relationship. So absolutely.
I'm just thinking of a patient I had who, a guy with type C traits, and he was in a very abusive relationship. And I mean, I think unfortunately type C is put up with a lot, whether it's high conflict, emotional abuse, or even sometimes physical abuse or worse. And you may not see them in a couples therapy setting because they're certainly not going to be the one to create conflict and say, I think we need to go to couples therapy. Although obviously resentment and anger may rise. So I wonder also if maybe the worst cases we don't see, and it's more maybe the the cases of type C, but not at the extremes, because maybe they would just keep putting up with it.
Perhaps. I think that is a good point in terms of people just put up with it. And I also think there's still some shame and taboo in 2026 around going to therapy.
Absolutely.
It still exists. It still exists. But good point. Yeah.
The old saying of, well, we don't, our problems aren't that bad.
Yeah, our problems are, that's for people who really need help, right? Sort of all the ways that we can convince ourselves that we don't need help. And I think it's the whole notion of asking for help, right? As a strength, not as a weakness, or seeing it as a really good, vulnerable place to be in.
I love what you were saying, because I was just thinking, how do we convince someone who maybe has been getting their needs met in such a way to be willing to be more flexible? And I love what you were saying, but I'm also just thinking, because this would be the partner, because a type C is so not genuine, and because there may be lots that you don't know about them, tapping into that. So yes, you may have to be more flexible. Yes, you may not get your needs met in the exact same way that they were, but you also get so much more than you were getting.
Absolutely. You're getting the whole person. Right. You're getting the unexpressed desires. It's not just pleasing you, but like, wouldn't you want to please your partner too? Wouldn't you want to make her happy, or make him happy, or make them happy? Aren't you curious about them? So I think the end way there for a couple is to see the relational impact, right? I think it's explaining to the person on the receiving end what's happening to the type C person in terms of resentment, being probably emotional, checked out during sex, right? Because they're there pleasing the other person, right? It becomes a chore, not something they enjoy too. And so I think for the couples therapist, it would be to help their partner understand those aspects of it. And I think it's framing it not as a loss, but as a gain. It's not look at what you're losing, but look at what you're gaining in a relationship. So that would be an important frame to hold. And again, if your partner is your favorite person in the world that you absolutely love, that's something, at the very least, it would evoke curiosity. Right? And if the type C person is with someone who's saying, no, I'm not willing to change at all, that's information about if this is a healthy relationship to be in, because everyone isn't willing. Change is hard, right? But you can surely influence your partner, but you cannot make them change. And if you're with someone who's still like that, I think that's a good choice point to decide if this is a healthy relationship as you move forward.
So I have a question. Would you I'm thinking of two things. One, how do you help a type C person feel safe to work to start expressing their needs because they don't feel safe? Yeah. And how do you, not putting the burden, but how do you encourage the partner to, like you were just saying, intimacy? Yeah. How do you encourage the partner to not, to kind of push back a little bit when the type C says, I'm fine, or I don't need anything, or just doesn't really ask for it?
Okay. So I think the first part was, how do you help a type C person express what was it?
Feel safe.
Feel safe. Yeah. I guess I would first be curious about talking. So if they were to become more vulnerable, a little bit less agreeable, what would their biggest fear be with their partner? Would they fear that they would be rejected? Would they fear some type of punishment? Maybe they'll withhold emotions from them. Maybe they worry that their partner would leave them. But what's the fear around talking, right? And would there be anything positive that could come out of it? Because I think people immediately go to fear. And I think people, if they don't talk about the fear, they will start to loop, and the fear becomes real, and it will keep them stuck in a negative narrative, right? Could there be one positive thing that could come out of sharing this with your partner? It might make me feel seen in this relationship, right? I would feel less resentful. Maybe I'd want to spend more time with my partner. So I think when you explore the barrier to sharing and what the upside could be, I think it opens a door. I think for their partner, it's really, I think, one, educating them about what a type C person is. And I think it's really reframing the relationship. Because if you're on the receiving end, you're saying, "My partner's so generous, they're kind, they're so easy to get along with." Like, who would want to give those things up? And when you describe them, you're like, "Great, I want to meet this person," right? So I think it's the generosity is really being conflict avoidant. The going along to getting along is my feelings don't matter. So I think when you educate them to see what's underneath, that's the aha moment, right? And I think, if that person gets it there, then they become more curious about who's behind the mask, right? So that is the approach that I would take. It's around educating, opening, and I think that opening gets them curious. And if there's one thing that helps couples and long-term relationships, it's curiosity. So I think that can be really beneficial for their partner.
That's wonderful. And Lisa, we know you have a hard stop coming up in just a few minutes. If we could ask just one quick last question,
Sure.
wrap. We love to ask our guests what their favorite books are. Are there any great books that you recommend to the clients that you're working with, just that you love personally, that you think are very helpful just in overall health and well-being?
Sure. My go-tos, I'm a huge Esther Perel fan. I've done a lot of her workshops and trainings. So her two books, Mating and Captivity, which is about how do you maintain desire in a long-term relationship, classic. She also has a youth TED Talk that I have couples watch. Her other book, what is it on? I can't think of the title. It has written down, The State of Affairs. Also another excellent TED Talk that is, I consider, the Bible of infidelity recovery. Those are two. And I really like Terry Real's book, Us Getting Past You and Me. And it's the notion of helping couples, instead of focusing on the individual and the relationship, what about me? It helps them pivot to a we. And I feel like that's a really good book because I see a lot of people coming in, especially couples that have gotten married later in life. It's really hard to then be partnered with someone. So I would say those are my top three. But I must say, I can't wait for your book to come out because now I know what to say about type C. So that will be next that I'll be recommending. I can't wait.
Well, thank you so much. We're excited.
Yes.
May 2027. We're
I'm
coming.
excited too. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
I just really think there are some really special, really important things that you said that our audience will value so much and be very supportive and really help them a lot. So I really think you said some terrific things.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I think it's wonderful work that you're doing because I think when we become more knowledgeable about ourselves and our partner does, we have better relationships. So thank you so much for inviting me. This was awesome. And I can't wait for your book to come out. I'm really excited.